Let's get over to Sydney. Lowy Institute senior fellow Richard McGregor is there. He's the author of Asia's Reckoning, China, Japan and the Fate of U.S. Power in the Pacific Century, as well as being a Bloomberg opinion columnist. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. Let's kick things off with, how does this look in your view? What sort of deal do you think they can actually strike, and how deep will it be, and will it be able to address intractable issues such as intellectual property?
Well, I would say it's almost certain we get sort of an extension or a delay of the tariffs, so that means we get some kind of deal. At the very minimum, you might get some sort of down payments by China and the US. You know, China will agree to buy more soybeans or LNG and the like. But my guidepost for this is what Liu He, the Chinese negotiator, said very early on. He said, 40% of what the US wants we can give them. 40% is negotiable, 20% is non-negotiable. So, you know, there's a long, long way to go before we even get to that 20%, let alone fix it. So I think whatever happens now is just a way station on a larger geopolitical contest.
Right. So when it comes to at least the trade issue, I would imagine that's the initial 40%. The low-hanging fruit will buy a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. What is that second component, that other 40%, before we even talk about that 20% component at the very end of what you mentioned there?
I think the second component is really about various aspects of market access. You know, the US has had a long list of complaints we've been pushing for many years in the services industry, financial services in particular. That includes credit cards, securities companies, banks and the like. China has shown some sort of willingness to negotiate on that, but we don't know the actual detail, which is very important. So I think it's market access issues, not just one-off purchases. That's the sort of second lot which they could move on after a sort of a down payment by March 1.
And I did say seemingly intractable issues surrounding intellectual property. How will that be dealt with? Because it also becomes notoriously difficult to verify.
Well, it's not just that. I think it's basically you're going into the core of the Chinese system. I mean, China does not see why it should not develop its own technology. You know, the core of what Xi Jinping is doing with the economy is trying to march China up the value chain. To do that in China, you simply don't have sort of good macroeconomic conditions. The state leads it, the state funds it, and the state is not just in Beijing, the state is in the provinces, the state is in the cities. Everybody in China, for example, is competing to get on the AI, artificial intelligence bandwagon. So that's what the Chinese system is. China doesn't see why it should unravel its system just to please the US. It also doesn't see why it should rely on US and other foreign technology. So it's very hard to see how you get a real deal in those areas.
And it's going to be interesting because in a couple of weeks, we have the NPC in Beijing, the National People's Congress. Help me understand, do you think the party has gained politically from all of this, or have they shown some weakness?
I think for the moment in China, what we see with Xi Jinping is a kind of rally round the flag moment. I certainly think there was a period late last year, July, August, a little bit on, where there's a lot of criticism of Xi Jinping on a number of levels. First, on economic policy. Second, on his handling or misjudgment of Mr. Trump. But for the moment, with the US pressing so hard, the Huawei case, the manner in which it's been conducted, the attempts to keep Huawei out of Europe and the like, for example, I think for the moment the Chinese system is sort of galvanized about finding a position to sort of push back on that. But I think later on, you know, well beyond the NPC in March, I think that's when the pressures will come back again. And the pressures might come most of all if the economy slows much further than they need to, and they have to get into the stimulus game again.